G'day fellas, and welcome to a tier list. This is going to be a successor to the previous video that we did. In that video, we had English sitting at S tier, and that has drastically changed for them. So unfortunately for the English, they have gone down quite a few pegs. And the reason why is because this tier list was done immediately after the Mangonel patch came out. And as you can see here, we've had 50% additional damage added to the Mangonel, as well as that increase in tile, or in radius. We also had a big change to the Holy Roman Empire, as well as the Abbasid Dynasty, and we didn't really know exactly what direction we were going in, but fortunately we've had the Red Bull Wololo. If you can give it a Google and see exactly where it is, we've had the Red Bull Wololo that has come, and it has given us a whole bunch of interesting games to analyze, and we now know a little bit more about exactly where it is. There you can see Red Bull Wololo Legacy. Here it comes. It has already begun over on EGC TV. I will leave a link in the description, but it's time to get to the tier list because things have changed drastically here, and I'm not even kidding you. The English are now D tier. They have gone, in my opinion, from an S tier civilization to a D tier civilization in this single change. And the reason why is because this Mangonel nerf, or this Mangonel buff, hurts the English the most. Because the English they absolutely love to make longbows. And they just simply can't do it anymore. It's so much more difficult for them to do it. And not that it's difficult for them to do it, but it's so easy for their enemies to counter them. And that's part of the reason why English have just dropped down. Now, English are still the best late game civilization there are. In my opinion, I believe they are better than the Chinese in the late game. But I think that at the moment, unfortunately, they've got a pretty strong feudal age. Their castle's not terrible, but they really do fall off around those big timings. And unfortunately, with the strength of the Mangonel, it just basically means that in the event you go for any kind of feudal push, that if your enemy makes it to castle and gets a single Mangonel out, that's pretty much it. That's all over Red Rover. The push is killed and just, move on to the next phase of the game, at which point, obviously, it's not a good phase for the English. So unfortunately for them, they do sit down in the D tier. When it comes to the changes that you'd want to see out of the English, I really don't know what direction to go with it. I'm thinking like maybe you want to buff up the Abbey of Kings. That could be an option. There's still people that do play the English. In fact, we did see the English come out from De Muslim in the Road to Red Bull. He pulled it out and had some great success with the Abbey of Kings. So it's just an interesting concept. I really don't know because they are so drastically affected by that single buff to the Mangonel. Now, other changes that we have seen here is the Holy Roman Empire. So in that initial list, I think we had them up in the A tier, and we're looking to potentially put them up into the S tier. That's not the case. They've actually come back down a little bit. So they're going to be on the B tier. So that buff wasn't as strong as we did think it was going to be. It definitely doesn't seem to have the impact that we did think it was going to have. Still a strong civilization, obviously quite playable, sitting in B tier. Prefers those closed off maps where it can grab the relics, but we are seeing people experimenting with new strategies. A big one that we are seeing is 2 town centers, we've seen 2 town center play with the Holy Roman Empire. Very difficult for you to kill that forward town center because of the emergency repairs. And as a result, we do see them moving up staying pretty high in that tier list. Their late game, as the same as the English, incredibly strong in the late game. The Horseman Lance combination is a very deadly one. And so that's always something to watch out for. But unfortunately for them, they are going to be sitting down in that B tier. Next civilization that we're going to be talking about, it is the French. And the French are the only S tier civilization in my opinion. They are quite a strong civilization. Incredibly good on every single matchup. Or on every single map, good into every single matchup. They don't really have a bad matchup. I think about worst is the Mongols, but even then, it is a civilization or it's still a matchup that's pretty decent for them. And so, if your best matchup is a decent matchup, then you're doing something right. And indeed, the French are at the moment arbitraire knights. We're seeing the Royal Institute really starting to take over as well, which is something that I suspected would happen. Once we start seeing more greedy builds coming out, the 2 town centers, it means people are going to have more villages in the second age. They're going to be making more knights in the second age, and it's going to make more of a reason for them to go for that Royal Institute. And we've started to see players do it. We now see French mirrors where both players are going for the Royal Institute, because if you don't, you will lose. And so that is why the French at the moment are sitting S tier. Just a very versatile civilization. Almost impossible to stop a 2 town center expansion from them. There's only a few civilizations that can actually punish it, and because of that, because of their versatility as well, just with their 1 town center plays and their all-ins, they really do hold all their cards. In pretty much in every single matchup, you basically just have to do as the French does. If the French goes for a 2nd town center, you can go for a 2nd town center. If the French goes castle, you can go castle. But if you don't, if you stop making units, there is a really good chance you will just die to their push, and we've seen it time and time again. But a matchup that we have seen quite a bit has been between the French and the Delhi, who are going to be sitting in the A tier. So a little bit of a move up for the Delhi. I think we had them in the B tier previously. Indeed, we did. We were sitting on the B tier previously, but now going to be coming over to the A tier. This civilization did fall out of favor a fair bit, but it's now come back in, and it seems to be pretty damn strong. We're seeing it a lot. Picked very, very commonly up in the road to Red Bull. Being a first pick for many people, we're seeing it coming out on Dry Arabia. And because of that, it's primarily that Castle Age push that is really so difficult to deal with when those elephants start to come out. Once those sacred sites are online, the relics are all gathered in, and the compound of the defender seems to be the landmark that people are going for in Age 3. So if you are a Delhi fan, then now is a good time to be logging in and playing the Delhi, because I tell you what, they are looking good at the moment. A very strong, a versatile civ. Obviously not the strongest late game, and interestingly, both of these two civilizations are at the top of the table, not the strongest of late games. But at the end of the day, I mean, late game is something that you're rarely going to be getting to if you're able to finish the game in the feudal. Isn't that right? So, next civilization that we're going to talk about that's also in the A tier, it's the Mongols. So, interestingly, I was throwing up about whether I wanted to chuck the Mongols in S tier or A tier, and I was almost going to the extent of saying, well, maybe I should put French in S+ tier. For me, it's very difficult. I'd be tempted to probably put the Mongols above Delhi, though. That is for sure. Mongols, obviously, an incredibly strong civilization, incredibly good with the people who focus on the civilization. So if you are a one-trick pony and you play the Mongols, you're going to be rewarded heavily for doing that. But their versatility is... They are the problem with the Mongols is obviously they are versatile, but they are also predictable, and it becomes very easy for people to predict, okay, he's going to tower rush me. They're also very easy to scout, but at the same time they're quite easy to punish as well, which is something that we have seen players now starting to learn to do. Their timing pushes in the Castle Age are incredibly strong. Obviously, we see this trench building still going on for the Mongols with their outposts. Really good on a lot of those open maps. On the closed maps, not as good. But it's rare that you see those closed maps coming out. But, I mean, they're still pretty damn good on maps like Mongolian Heights. Still really good on Altai, those sorts of maps. So this civilization, a top tier pick. Next up, it is going to be the Russ. It is the Russ, and they are sitting in the B tier. I was tempted to actually put the Russ in the A tier, and this is where I was like running into a little bit of difficulties with my hierarchy, almost tempted to make another sort of tier, because I don't think the Holy Roman Empire and the Russ are in the same tier. In fact, I should probably put the Russ, or put it like that, or just... because it needs to be demonstrated that the Rus are a very strong civilization at the moment. I would almost be tempted, you know what, I'm just going to chuck them in A tier. I do think they're a very strong civilization at the moment. But see, this is the problem, right? I don't think they're as good as Delhi, and I don't think they're as good as the Mongols. So it's like, it becomes difficult. But I guess I can explain that to you, and you can sort of understand that. But the reason why Rus are so damn strong at the moment is just simply because they are a versatile civ. There's so many different options that you've got with them, whether you want to be going for that 2 town center play, just 1 town center play, whether you're going to be going for a fast castle, whether you want to be going for the Guz build. There's so many options available to you, and I think the best thing about it is often it can be difficult for your enemy to react in time, because you might have a second town center up already on the edge of the map. They might not have scouted that second town center out because they can't scout stone. Stone isn't a factor for them, because the Rus don't gather stone, they just trade it, and that's what makes it so damn difficult with that Golden Gate. So look, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Golden Gate nerf, even though I know the developers have said they want to bring the other civilizations up to the top. Golden Gate is such a strong landmark, and it really is carrying the Rus here. Also, in the late game, Rus are quite a strong civilization, have got a lot of good matchups as well, only really losing out to the Chinese Grenadier and the English Longbow in the and I guess arguably the Camel Rider as well, or the Camel Archer is quite strong, but they destroy the Holy Roman Empire, destroy the Mongols, the Delhi, the French in the late game as well. But a strong Castle Age civ, and I think that's definitely what we're seeing here, is like all of these civilizations towards the top are strong Castle Age civilizations. Next up, it's going to be the Abbasid Dynasty. Now, Abbasid Dynasty, I think we had down in the bottom tier in our last tier list. You can see right there, it was a D tier civilization. So it's definitely come up from there, and I'm almost tempted to drop it into the B tier. I do think that the Abbasid is quite a good civilization, but once again, I don't think it's on the same level as the Holy Roman Empire. I think the Holy Roman Empire are probably a little bit under where the Abbasid are, but we will chuck them in the same tier. Once again, these guys are a predictable civ. You know what they're going to do. You know it's always going to be about that second town center. So the question is, how do you go about playing about it? But I think necessarily, the question isn't, you know, what are they going to do? It's about whether you can stop what they're going to do. And that's really where the fun comes in. And that's something that we did see between the Russ and the Abbasid matchup, because this is a matchup that has developed quite a bit, but it's now become really about skill and about being able to punish and stop that Abbasid player, because it's definitely not an unwinnable matchup for either civilization. But I guess the big thing for me here is in this matchup, or just in general with the Abbasid, typically they're kind of like China with regard to, they always want to try and get a third town center where possible. Like very commonly you will see 2 town centers, but if your enemy spots that and goes for a second town center quite early, then your response might be 3 town centers. We see this as an example in the Abbasid versus French matchup. You'll see 3 town centers come out for Abbasid. In the matchup against the Chinese, you'll also see 3 town centers come out. And even if the Mongols goes for an early second town center, you will also see 3 town centers coming out for the Abbasid. Interestingly, the Rus, they've started adding in second town centers for their build orders against the Abbasid. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing 3 town centers out for the Abbasid. And that's a good thing for Abbasid. The more town centers, the merrier, because then they're going to be really generating, more villages at a cheaper price, therefore getting a greater discount on villages even sooner, and therefore transferring that or translating that into a bigger military. And then the last civilization on our list, it is going to be China. And I was sort of throwing up about where I want to put this, because I do think China is strong, but there's a caveat. It requires matchups and it requires maps. So I'm tempted to put them down in D tier with the English and put them above the English, but I'm also tempted to put them in the C tier and put them below the Holy Roman Empire. But by the same token, I don't think that they're on the same level as the Holy Roman Empire or the Abbasid Dynasty. So we're going to drop them down. I'm going to leave them in the D tier for now. Keep in mind, obviously this tier list, it's subjective. It's based on the way I feel about the game right now. I think at the moment I'm sitting at Diamond 2, like maybe like 1290 or something like that rating. So I'm by no means a top level player here. I'm just giving you my opinion. I think Beastie's also doing tier lists as well, so I'll leave a link in the description. I'm curious to see how his tier list would differ from mine at the moment. But I guess for me, the big thing about China is obviously it is about reacting with China. It is all about reacting and going up against some of these top civilizations. You know what you're going to be going up against, and sometimes you still don't have the power to stop it. Like if we take a look, watching a lot of the Chinese games that we saw coming out of the first week of Red Bull Lol, it became very clear that even if you knew what your enemy was doing, sometimes you couldn't stop it. As an example, let's say you're playing up against the French, and the French is going for a 1 base all in. There were players who are, I'm not even kidding you, like top 20 players. There's a Chinese guy or Taiwanese guy I know, and he was playing up against the French player, and he played it perfectly, and he still gets overrun because the French knights just trade out so well. So many of them survive, and it just really comes down to like the minutiae of micro. And unfortunately, if you get a bad trade, get a bad fight, then that knight number is just going to continue to pile up, continue to build up, and it's just going to be a matter of time before you are overwhelmed. But I think overall, obviously, China gets incredibly strong in the Castle Age and even stronger in the Imperial Age. They're only really outdone by the English in the Imperial Age. Once they get to the Castle Age, they're quite a strong civilization, obviously beaten by these guys at the top in Castle. But once you've got a couple of Nesta Bs out, you definitely do feel really, really safe. And then it comes down to a question of, how much greed you can get away with. How many? Obviously, 2 town center Song Dynasty is pretty much the name of the game. But the question is whether you're going to be able to survive until that point. But look, I'm really enjoying China at the moment, even though I do rate them quite lowly. I do think they're a pretty fun civ. We're also starting to see the Barbican meta really come back in. This was something that we did see a while ago. A couple of months ago, we saw people looking to do Barbican drops, Barbican rushes non-stop, and it fell out of favor. But now it's come back in, and in fact, we actually saw Barbicans coming out, or barbecue rushes in particular coming out, even against difficult matchups like against the Holy Roman Empire, against France. So it is, I think China as a civilization, largely undiscovered. And I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes, because I do think this civ might become an aggro civilization once again. I wouldn't be surprised if the direction for China isn't to go into Dynasty, but is instead to go into forward Barbican and professional scouts behind it, then look to try and secure food income, then maybe add a second town center. But it is a civilization that has the ability to obtain map control almost immediately. It's got the ability to deny boars away from the Rus. It's got the ability to deny gold away from the French, gold away from the Holy Roman Empire, stone away from the Abbasid Dynasty. It's a civilization that has, through that Barbican, and ironically, even though the Barbican doesn't really do much, it's basically a glorified outpost, it actually does a huge amount in the early game. So it is quite a decent landmark. But anyway, that's going to be the tier list for now. There's been quite a few changes in here since the last one. Let me know what you think. I'm curious where you guys would rate these civilizations, what you would change, what you would shift. Keep in mind, I'm basing this on both my own personal experiences on the latter, and obviously as a China player, I am biased. Some people, like I know Don Artie as an example, he hates playing against China. He thinks China is one of the strongest civs in the game. He doesn't know how to play against China. Often, he's telling me there's nothing I can do against them. They've got the answer to every one of my questions. And so, you know, if we were to do a tier list, maybe he's putting China on S tier and maybe France down in B tier, something like that. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Where would you put it? Where would you change it? And hey, I'll catch you guys in the next one. And make sure you guys check out Road to Red Bull. It's happening every single weekend, 15 GMT, and Outback Octagon as well. I'm sure you guys have already checked that out. It's a lot of fun. I'll leave a link in the description to where you can catch all the action live, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.